Okay, hello and welcome to you. Let me get right to it. Human design. I've been through a very lengthy process over the last 20 years and have had a great deal of experience of introducing this knowledge in many different ways. One of the things to recognize first to begin with is that human design is the science of differentiation. Differentiation. In other words, it is about being able to find mechanically what makes an individual, a person, unique. And more than simply understanding what is the nature of that uniqueness, in other words, what is the dominant imprint in them genetically, but also an understanding of how they can operate out of what is that imprint. In other words, to be able to operate as themselves. It is something to really grasp about the nature of the world that we live in, because we live in a world that is fundamentally dualistic in all ways. It is always a this and a that. And everything that you can discover about human design is based on understanding that this and that, these differences, and the way in which they impact on us. In terms of human design, there's a basic thing to recognize. Everything about life, everything about one's success in life, is actually rooted in one thing and one thing only. That is, it's rooted in decision-making. Decision-making. Life, being dualistic, being a binary, life always has a this and that to it, this way or that way at the fork in the road. Everything about where you are in your life now is the construct that's been built on many, many, many decisions that you've made. The essence of this knowledge is to understand how to make decisions as yourself, and to realize that the way in which you have been making decisions throughout your life has been deeply conditioned, and in fact has moved you further and further away from the possibility of realizing what your actual potential is. Human design is about decision making. Look at the example that's here, this body graph. And the first thing that you notice about a body graph is that, you have centers that are colored in, and you have centers that are not colored in. This is one of those basic this and that's of the graph. And when you're looking at what's colored in, what you're looking at is the byproduct of a connection being made between two centers. It's called a definition. And this definition actually creates circuits. In other words, it links up various aspects within the body graph. And this theme of definition is something very essential to understand, because it is one of the basic mechanical things that we are offered in this knowledge, is that when you're looking at this definition, what you're looking at is something that is fundamentally reliable. I mean, reliable in a way that you need to grasp truly deeply. It is these definitions that are always, always functioning. This is you. This is the essence of what you're here to live out. And it's there all the time. And it's always consistent. Moment by moment, week by week, month by month, year by year, until the end. And yet at the same time, we have a counterpoint to what is colored in, what is fixed, what is defined, what is reliable. The counterpoint is what's open. Now, when you're looking at these centers that are colored in white, when you're looking at these centers in your own design, please understand something. They're not empty, they're not broken, and they do not need to be fixed. But what they really represent, in the simplest of language, is that where your definition is your nature, your openness is where you are nurtured. Those, basic dualistic expression, nature and nurture. Within the context of human design, nurture is seen as conditioning. These open centers, these centers that are white, they are receptors. They are receptors to anything that can hook them up. And we come to a dilemma. We come to a very deep dilemma. It is a dilemma in a sense that cannot be escaped. You see, we are a bioform. And as a bioform, we have certain imperatives. They are, they are deeply, deeply, deeply ground into the nature of what we are. We have the imperative that drives us to survive, to reproduce, and to stay alive long enough. And everything about that imperative is rooted in a reproduction. In other words, it's rooted in the nature of the gene pool itself. What we know is that genetics is not in favor of sameness. It isn't. We are not attracted to sameness. And we are not attracted to sameness because genetically it is suicidal. In other words, if you keep on reproducing children with your close relatives, you know the result, which is why this is taboo in every society on the planet. And it is not taboo for any moral reason. It is that the byproduct of that is going to bring dysfunction to the gene pool. So we are automatically attracted to what is different. In other words, we are automatically attracted to what we are not. So we have these parts of us that are fixed and reliable, that truly we can trust, but we're not interested in them. What we're interested in is what we don't, quote unquote, have. What we don't have is what we're always looking for. And so we end up in a situation in which having what we don't have becomes who we are. In other words, we become what in design we call the not-self. Okay, let's look at another binary. Human design is about decision-making. If you ask any, normal, quote-unquote, human being how they make decisions, fundamentally the answer is that they make decisions with their minds. This is one of the great dilemmas. This is the source of true pain in this life. And this decision-making with the mind, how does this decision-making work? First of all, you have to see something about human design, because it isn't just a binary in the way in which it relates to the world around it. It is constructed on a fundamental binary of two calculations. There is nothing else like that. And these two calculations represent two very different kinds of data. What you have on the left is that you have the information that you see translated into the red in the design. So you see the red here. Wherever the red is, it's coming from the design side. This is the unconscious. This is what you do not have conscious access to. In other words, when you think about yourself, you never think about those things that are red. You're always thinking about those things that are black. And yet this side here, the design side, this is the consciousness of the vehicle. A human being is a binary consciousness. We have a consciousness that most of us are deeply familiar with, which we call mental. But it's also obvious to anyone who pays any attention, at least for a moment, to the complexities of their own vehicle. In other words, what is managing keeping you alive? What is managing all of those neurons firing so that you can interpret what I'm saying and store it someplace? There is a vehicle consciousness, the design consciousness that runs this vehicle. It ran the vehicle before the personality even came into the body. In human design, the personality crystal, that is who you think you are, actually enters into the vehicle exactly 88 degrees of the sun before birth. That's about 88 or 89 days. In other words, it comes in late, after everything has been constructed. One of the things that is taught in human design is that it is the body that is the life. It is the mind that is the passenger, that is here to observe the life, not to manage it, not to run it. In human design, this concept of making decisions correctly is rooted in a movement of decision-making from the mind to the vehicle, to the body. We have two authorities in human design, an inner authority and an outer authority. The outer authority is mind. My mind can be valuable to you, but it's not allowed to make decisions for me. An inner authority, where the mechanics of all of this lead us. Inner authority that is rooted in what your type is, what your strategy is, and what your definition is. So that the decisions that you make in your life are not based on what's open, where you can be so easily conditioned, but the decisions are based on where you are fixed, where you are consistent, where your true nature can actually emerge. I want you to think about the mind for a moment, your mind. Think about your chart and those places that are open. Every single one of these centers that are open have what's called a not-self strategy. This open heart center, the not-self strategy, is always trying to prove that one is worthy. Always. And this becomes a mental strategy. It becomes the conditions for making decisions. I'll say yes to this because maybe it'll make me worthy in the eyes of others. I'll take on the burden of, working like a slave for somebody just so they'll think I'm worthy. It has nothing to do with who they are. It has nothing to do with their definition. It has nothing to do with managing their life correctly. It is simply based on the genetics driving us towards what we are not, and we fall for it. Become victims of it. And are filled with fear. Here's somebody that has an open splenic center, the body's immune system, the feel-good system, the laundry. And it's open. So this is somebody that holds on to things that aren't good for them. So somebody says to them, will you do this for me? I really need you to do this. And this person hates it. But they want to prove that they're worthy. And they hold on to things that aren't good for them. So they slave and slave and slave and slave until they collapse. And all of this becomes the strategy of the mind. Here is somebody that is born with a dependency to hold on to anyone that can make them feel good. And I don't mean feel good in the way their personality interprets it. I mean feel good in the sense of somebody hooking up their spleen. Somebody that comes with a gate over here and forms a definition. Or somebody that comes from here. Or somebody that comes from here. Or here. Or here. You see, we're all susceptible to this deep conditioning that comes from the outside. Every single one of these gates, they're called hanging gates. They just sit there out of the center, dangling, always looking to the other side, always dreaming that they could be the thing that they are not. Take this channel. This is called the channel of talent. And at one end, within the spleen and awareness center, we have the 48th gate that is the gate of the well. You can see, by the way, that it's coated in black. And if you go over to the personality side over here, you'll see it right there, 48th gate. And this 48th gate is the gate of depth. Of depth. It is the potential depth necessary for talent. But it doesn't have the other end. And the other end is the 16th gate, and it's the gate of skills. Skills. So what do you think this person wants more than anything else in their life? They want skills. They're not interested in their own depth. They're not even sure they have it. But they dream of having skills. So they learn one thing after another endlessly and are never satisfied. Because they're trying to become something that they are not. That they are not. And you see, mentally there's no way, to protect yourself. There's no way, mentally, to say, there's all these traps for me. It doesn't work that way. See, what human design shows us is something really, really, truly incredible. It shows us precisely where our imprint is. And it shows us precisely, mechanically, where the key is, so that we have a way in which we can make decisions that are not mental. Because that is not what the mind is for. It isn't. This is the great illusion. And it's not about no mind. Don't be fooled. Mind is a beautiful thing. And it is truly of value to the other. And it's only of value to the other when it's no longer burdened with you constantly using it to try to make decisions. And those decisions are all being guided by your not self. These themes, these fears, these conditions that have nothing to do with you. You see, if I do a reading for somebody that has an open heart center, I tell them they have nothing to prove. Because they don't. It's only if it's colored in that you have to prove. This is not colored in. They don't have to prove anything. These over here don't have to hold on to those things that aren't good for them. They'll be fine as long as they can operate correctly as themselves, but not according to the mind. We have this split, these two sets of information. The design, the unconscious. And over here, the personality. This is who you think you are. You can see how little you know about yourself. You look at your design, you see all those things colored in black. That's what you have access to. This is who you think you are. Those things that are in red, you only begin to think of them as a part of you because this is what people tell you about yourself. You begin to notice them as traits. They're just there. If you say to this person, you're very opinionated, they don't think they are. They don't. The 17th gate here is the gate of opinions. But it's unconscious. And the 62nd gate is the gate of details at the other end. The voice in the throat center that expresses an opinion with detail. It's called the channel of organization. And you can see, very important for this person, it's their sun. And they think of themselves as a fact person. They don't think of themselves as an opinionated person. They only begin to see that as themselves because people keep telling them, boy, you're opinionated. But they don't have conscious access to it. You only have access to what's colored in the black. And this, who you think you are, it's not intended to guide your vehicle. It's not intended to guide your life. When you think about design, always a wonderful place to go is here in the center of the G center, the identity. In here we have what's called the magnetic monopole, and it holds us together. It holds us together in the illusion of our separateness. It is an illusion. This connection between the design and the personality. It is not a comfortable connection. And the mind itself is not equipped to actually be able to guide the life. And in the earliest introductions to human design, one of the analogies that I used, and one that remains so deeply important, is that, here in the head center is the personality crystal, and here in the ajna center is the design crystal, and here in the G center is the monopole. And when you think about these things, the fundamental relationship between the design and the monopole, the builder of the body, that in this context, the design is the vehicle and the magnetic monopole is the driver. Now it's something to, think about. We're objects moving in space. It is one of the fundamental things of physics. And in these objects moving in space, we all have, in fact, a trajectory. That trajectory, in essence, this very movement, is what we call life. And within the context of the mechanics of the body graph, it is this relationship between the monopole and the design that is the engine and the force of the life. It is the life. You see, the mind is not the life. The mind, stuck out here at the top of the graph, outside of the body in a sense, this mind is a passenger. We are a passenger consciousness. We are a passenger consciousness in a vehicle. And we have to stop interfering with the correctness of that vehicle. Its natural ability to give us the life that is correct for us. If we stop interfering with our minds,